as I was saying in the last part, that as an organism develops and grows, becomes an adult, this doesn't occur in a vacuum, right? The environment has definitely an influence. So many phenotypic characters that we see are a resultant from a combination of the heredity, right? The genes being expressed, the genotype, and the influence of the environment. So some human characteristics are influenced by the environment. This is that argument of nature versus nurture, and how much the environment influences certain characteristics isn't fully clear, and it's variable for different individuals. This leads us to what's called epigenetic inheritance. This is the transmission of traits by mechanisms that are not directly involving the DNA sequence. So normally we say that the DNA is broken up into discrete units of inheritance, or has discrete units of inheritance, the genes and alleles, which are variations of the genes. The genes get expressed and they produce proteins, and the proteins have characteristics. Skin color, hair color, eye color, height, weight, etc., right? But it's not simply the expression of the genes. Sometimes the environment will influence how genes are expressed and even when they're expressed. Gene expression varies during embryological development, during childhood, during adolescence, and then during adulthood. So, for example, during one's lifetime, from the embryo all the way up to adulthood, the environment can alter how genes get expressed while not altering the genes themselves, not changing the genome. This is some newer genetic research that's been done. So with epigenetic modifications and changes in gene activity that then result, that actually can be carried on to the next generation. So the influence in the environment doesn't just influence the one particular individual, but that can be transferred genetically to the offspring. So it's basically something that has happened to your parents or grandparents can result in changes in you. So for example, the incidence of heart disease and diabetes can be regulated by epigenetic factors, something that's simply outside of our genes, the influence of the environment, for example. So the amount of food that your grandfather or grandmother ate when they were 9 to 12 years old, so if they went through like the Depression and they were malnourished and basically were starving during this time, that may influence your susceptibility to certain diseases. If they ate really fatty foods during this period of time and were, say, heavy, that could cause a higher incidence of heart disease and diabetes in you, even though this was occurring to your grandparents. And why? It's because between the ages of 9 and 12, that's when the cells that give rise to sperm first grow and develop. So those cells are influenced at this age bracket, and those cells that give rise to sperm, well, that gets transferred on to the next generation, and that can get transferred on to the next generation. So epigenetics is a very interesting field in genetics, but basically the main idea here is that epigenetic modifications due to the environment can alter gene expression in the individual and in the individual's offspring. So this is like very different from the very simple genetics we saw with a monohybrid cross in Mendel's peas. Okay, so let's look at the chromosome theory of inheritance, which we've been talking about for a while. So genes and alleles, they're located on specific locations, which are called loci on chromosomes. And then the movement behavior of the chromosomes during meiosis and fertilization accounts for the inheritance pattern. Let's go back to these flowers. Right? Purple flower, white flower, dominant recessive inheritance. The alleles get passed on, the genes get passed on with the chromosomes, and that determines the genetics of the F1 generation. If you do an F1 cross, their alleles get passed on through the gametes to the next generation, and the genetic makeup of the offspring, the genotype, determines their coloration, the phenotype. And this is an example here of dominant recessive inheritance, like what we saw with Mendel's peas. Right? the simplest case of inheritance, by the way. Okay? So the chromosomes undergo segregation, separation, right, during meiosis to produce the gametes, and then independent assortment also during meiosis. Right? These are Mendel's laws, which is why they separate out into their gametes. Okay? And this is the simplest case because both parents are homozygous, dominant or recessive. So linked genes, however, these are genes that are located close to each other on the same chromosome. Right? So most likely they will travel together and be linked together as the chromosomes separate during meiosis. Right? There's no real chance of them getting separated through, say, crossing over. Okay? So such genes are often inherited as a set and therefore don't really follow Mendel's laws of independent assortment. So when Mendel first established his laws of inheritance, they discovered certain patterns of inheritance that didn't follow simple Mendelian laws of inheritance. And then that's when they discovered things like codominance and polygenic inheritance and epigenetics, and then even linked genes. What Mendel did get correct is that the genes or alleles get inherited from the parents, and the genes and alleles are located on chromosomes, and the chromosomes do segregate independently. So again, exceptions or certain patterns of inheritance that don't follow simple Mendelian patterns of inheritance, like with P color or P shape, have been explained through different inheritance conditions or inheritance patterns, like linked genes. So again, Mendel worked back in the 1860s. So the fact that he was able to establish the basic fundamentals of inheritance was pretty darn impressive. And then what has happened since then is they've been able to explain why certain patterns of inheritance don't appear to follow Mendelian laws, but they've been able to explain why. Okay? So again, when crossing over occurs, if the genes are linked, they will tend to stay together, even with crossing over. Okay? Now, again, with Mendelian genetics, simple genetic patterns that he examined with his P's, this was actually very simple rules of genetic inheritance with very simple dominant and recessiveness patterns of inheritance. Remember, the flowers are always purple or white, or the peas were yellow or green, or round or wrinkled, right? One thing that Mendel was, in a way, was lucky, because all of these characters that he examined, all 7 of them, he was lucky because all 7 of these characters that were determined by their alleles, all of these alleles, remember, alleles are different versions of genes, all of these alleles were on separate chromosomes. None of them were linked genes or linked alleles on the same chromosomes. So he kind of got lucky that every single characteristic he looked at were based on chromosomes that had, or were based on alleles, right, genes, that were on separate chromosomes, which is why they were able to completely separate during meiosis. Okay, sex determination in humans. So humans, our gender, our sex, is based on what are called our sex chromosomes, X and Y chromosomes. If you're male, you're XY. Your sex chromosomes. If you're female, you're XX. The other 44 here chromosomes are called autosomes. And that determines our gender. Females are XX, males are XY, right? The sex chromosome pairs. So notice what happens when humans reproduce. Females can only contribute an X chromosome into their eggs because females are XX. Males, however, can contribute an X or a Y chromosome into their sperm because males are XY. So the gender of the offspring, our babies, is determined by the genetic contribution of the dad, not the mom. Okay? So just follow the little pattern here. The female egg is X. If it gets fertilized by an X sperm, X chromosome containing sperm, the offspring, the baby is going to be female because she's XX. If the X chromosome containing egg gets fertilized by a Y chromosome containing sperm, the offspring is going to be XY, sex chromosomes, male. If you remember, or if you've heard of King Henry VIII in England, he was upset because his queen and his mistresses kept giving him female offspring. He wasn't getting a male heir. He, I think, killed one and divorced another and just kept getting mad at his females. Well, it was his fault because he kept contributing X containing sperm into the female's X chromosome containing eggs and kept having female babies. It was his problem, so he probably should have cut his head off. Okay, so human females and males have 44 autosomes, the other 44 chromosomes that we have. Okay, so let's talk about sex-linked genes. These are genes, alleles, that are located on the sex chromosomes and hence are sex-linked disorders. Right? So most sex-linked genes are found on the X chromosome. So notice, if you are female, you're XX. If you're male, you're XY. If you happen to pick up an X-linked gene that's disordered, diseased, dysfunctional, if you're a male, well, you don't have another normal X chromosome, you're going to get the disorder of the condition. If you're female, and if it's a recessive condition, well, you have another X chromosome, so you're most likely going to be non-diseased or non-disordered, if you will. Okay? That's one of the reasons why females are genetically superior to males. All right. So a number of human conditions like red-green colorblindness, hemophilia, and certain types of muscular dystrophy result from sex-linked recessive alleles, which is why if you have colorblindness, hemophilia, or muscular dystrophy, you are most likely to be male, because you only need one copy of that defective allele or gene to get the disorder. If it's recessive, if you're female, it gets masked or hidden by the normal functioning allele or gene that's on the normal X chromosome. So notice these numbers here. That's a 7, that's a 25, that's a 45, and that's a 6. If you can't see all of these numbers, you're most likely have red-green colorblindness and most likely a male because it's a sex-linked disorder on the X chromosome. Okay? Heterozygotes females may have some defects, but generally they don't have the color blindness as severe as in males. Doesn't mean you're going to die or anything, it just means you're not going to be a pilot or a NASA astronaut, that sort of thing. Okay, so because they're located on the sex chromosome, sex-linked genes exhibit unusual inheritance patterns. All right? It's more common in males. So colorblindness is a recessive condition. A female will be colorblind if she receives the allele on both X chromosomes. So that's not as common. So notice over here, you have to have both colorblind alleles to be a colorblind female. And that's not so common because that means that you have to have a carrier female, that's a female symbol, mate with a diseased, well, colorblind male, that's the male symbol, in order to be able to inherit both colorblind alleles. Right? It is simply more common to have it occur in males because it's an X-linked disorder and the male doesn't have the second X chromosome that could hide or mask the condition, as in this situation here with the female who's a carrier. She has a dysfunctional colorblind allele but a normal allele, so she doesn't have the disorder, she's just a carrier. Okay? So again, sex-linked disorders are more prevalent in males. So hemophilia, right, is a sex-linked recessive disease.